Welcome back. Today we bring you a special conversation on the misconceptions on the Hindu swastika that has pervaded society, especially in the Western world, to the extent that for decades the Nazi symbol of the hooked cross has been wrongly called swastika. In some cases, the use of the Hindu holy symbol has even been misinterpreted to be the Nazi symbol. Now, organizations like the Coalition of Hindus of North America have been running a campaign to destigmatize the Hindu symbol at a time when Israel is involved in a war and references to Nazi discrimination against Jews is being talked about all over the world. There has been a trend to confuse the swastika again with the Nazi hate symbol. Hence, this effort to tell the people the true history of the Indian swastika and how it is not the same as the Hakenkreuz becomes even more important. Now, CoHNA launched its swastika education campaign in the summer of 2020 in US when the state of New York was debating a bill that would have termed the swastika as a hate symbol with no nuance at all. Since 2020, they've managed to stop bills banning swastika in the state of New York, New Jersey and Maryland. In 2022, they scored a partial win in California when the state amended a similar bill to include the term Hakenkreuz for the first time, though they did unfortunately also insist on including the term Nazi swastika. Joining me now is a board member of the Coalition of Hindus of North America, Pushpita Prasad. Pushpita Prasad, thanks a lot for joining us here on Plain Speak in our studios. So this has been a campaign the CoHNA has been running for the last 3 years or so. Was it the legislations that were coming up in the US that were the trigger for it?
Absolutely. That was the trigger. Obviously, we were used to the problems that we have with the usage of our symbol. But what really triggered us to take action was exactly the New York bill. Because it was written with no nuance, as you said, and it was basically going to teach kids to call 911 if they saw the symbol. Yeah. Now think about that when you have a child growing up there, or you just have your child's friend come over for a play date, and they happen to go into your puja room and see a swastik, right? They'll get a little freaked out that, my God, I come from, like, my friend comes from a terrorist family or whatever. So massive impact on our just basic freedom of religion. So we launched a very aggressive education and advocacy campaign, and we reached out to the senator in New York State who had launched the bill and kind of walked him through the story, walked several of his colleagues. And so that was the start of our advocacy campaign.
Can I ask you, how has this been received? Are people familiar at all with the differences? Are they open to recognizing the fact that the swastika has become wrongly implicated with the Nazi philosophy?
So I think that's where education and advocacy comes in. So the answer is no. I live in the state of California. California is home to 40% of America's Buddhists, massive Hindu communities, Jain communities. Yet in the summer of 2022, I met with about 30 to 40 lawmakers or their officers. And I would say 95% of them did not even know that the swastika had an alternative meaning. So when we'd show them our slides, they'd be like, oh my God, like, this is just amazing. And that's actually really shocking, because when you're talking to a staffer, their job is to know the communities that they're representing.
Yes.
And so they didn't have with that, and that's California, which prides itself on its diversity. It is a super diverse state. So there is a lot of ignorance, and I think there's a lot of ground to be covered.
But are they receptive to the idea that there needs to be a distinguishing here, and certainly the Hindu or the other Asian communities and faiths who use the swastika cannot be discriminated against, or they cannot be vilified for using this symbol, because this is going to be omnipresent in Hindus' houses?
It is, and so that's exactly been what we've been trying to educate on. And if you look at it, advocacy does work. We've had success, but it's a very sensitive topic, because Hindus, and we are definitely extremely sensitive to the horrors of the Holocaust. The problem in the West is when you start talking about this, they immediately first put you in the Holocaust denial camp, and so we always have to preface our thing by saying, look, we are absolutely sympathetic, and we completely understand the horrors that they went through. However, in some ways, you're actually, I always like to say, when you call Hitler's symbol the swastika, you're giving him more power in death than he had in life, because Hitler didn't like brown people of color of the Hindu faith or other faiths, but he never got to us enough to do us damage, right? But now in his death, by giving his symbol the name of swastika, you've actually given him enduring power that he didn't have over the Hindu, Buddhist and Jain communities while he was alive. And so that's one way to look at it. We are also very sensitive to working with, Jewish faith leaders, and we have a wonderful Jewish scholar who does some excellent work and comes and talks on this issue about it, and basically helps explain. And then we have, if you look at some of the coverage that we've got, some Jewish Holocaust survivors talk about how understanding that this symbol was not, the swastika was actually not what was used by Hitler, actually helped her, gave her comfort and help her on the healing journey.
It's natural for the Jewish community to feel a little traumatized when they see the symbol, even though the Nazi symbol is different. Even in the way it is made or drawn, it is different than the Indian swastika or the Hindu swastika. But it's natural to make that connection and feel traumatized. So what is it that you tell the Jewish communities who may feel traumatized by looking at this symbol?
So I think this is also just, we always start with the fact that this work has been going on for a while, and about a decade ago there was actually a meeting between very senior Israeli rabbis and Hindu faith leaders, and they all agreed that this was a misappropriation. At that point, the fact that Hitler had never used the word swastika had not been gained that much prominence, but the highest faith leaders in Israel were extremely sympathetic and understood the history of the swastika. I think what was needed is to kind of take that sort of high-level agreement forward, and that's what we're trying to do with our advocacy campaign.
Possibly one of the best ways to get this message across will be through the Jews themselves, isn't it? If they were to come out and say that, don't confuse the swastika with the hooked cross that Hitler used, that message would be received a little bit better.
It would be, and that's why we certainly have a lot of emphasis on trying to educate the Jewish community. But at the end of the day, also one of the fundamental things to remember is that words and context really matter. And so, we're not denying the trauma of the Holocaust at all. And we are also completely sympathetic that, there'll be a certain number of people who will just never get over it. We're absolutely sympathetic to that. But like I said, you don't want to give Hitler more power, right, than he had and than he really had even when he was alive.
Yeah. What is it that you would tell people to distinguish the history of the Hindu swastika? And actually, I got to know through you that actually the swastika is a truly global symbol. It has been used in, Greek periods. It's been used by native Indian Americans as well. So just give us a little bit of context about what you have found to be the history of this symbol.
Yeah, so like I said, I think the swastika has been in use for a good 10,000 years, and it's a truly global symbol. Because of course, I think I won't go into it in the Indian context, but in Japan it's known as the manji, and you'll find it on those Buddhas, and it raised in very similar sacred ways the way Hindus use it. Jains also use it. In America, the Native American tribes call it the whirling log, and they also use it, but unfortunately they were actually they were asked to stop using it in the 1940s by the US government.
Because of the Nazi connection.
Because of the Nazi connection, which is really unfortunate if you think of the horrible history of the Native Americans and everything that they had undergone. But yeah, you can find the symbol all over the world, in medieval churches, in Ethiopian churches, in Greece and Italy. If you go to the museums, you'll find a lot of the archaeological digs from the Hellenic era and pre-Hellenic era featuring this symbol. You even find it in an ancient synagogue in Israel. So I think it's one of those symbols that is truly global. And that's why I think, when we talk about the history and when we talk specifically about Hitler, why did he use this symbol?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to come to that, because that explanation is what will be sought by people whose minds you have to change.
Yeah, and again, there is no clear, we can only speculate, but Hitler grew up in the shadow of the Lamberg Abbey in Austria. And on the walls of the Austrian Lamberg Abbey is a very clear hooked cross, because this was commonly found among medieval and other churches as well. And so many people feel that that is the inspiration. That was what he developed into his Hakenkreuz. He gave that very distinctive black on red and white iconography. The ones on the Lamberg Abbey is like a golden and a brown thing, but I think that's the same symbol. And so that is where the word comes from. And fun fact is, Germany never stopped calling it Hakenkreuz. They still call it Hakenkreuz.
But all over the world, everywhere except Germany, it somehow got misrepresented as the swastika.
It was a translation error. So the first translation of Mein Kampf, which is obviously written in German, into English, translated it correctly, but that translation never became popular. The second translation by an Irish monk is the one that for some reason translated the Hakenkreuz into swastika, and that is what gained currency the world over, and that has now taken on a life of its own. But I always tell people, you don't need to know German, but you just need to look at the words, and when you see the Mein Kampf where Hitler describes how he developed his Hakenkreuz, the word Hakenkreuz jumps out over and over again. There's no swastika in there.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, the Nazis were avid propagandists. They had their own publications. They published a daily newspaper for 10 years and they called it the Hakenkreuz banner, not the swastika banner. And the Nazis had military honors that were named after Kreuz, because Kreuz means cross. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? If you're a military leader or a dictator and you want to motivate your people to do something.
It would be via religion.
Well, and it would be a religion or a symbol that they're familiar with, right? Why would you import a symbol from halfway across the world from a faith that nobody knows and say, oh, well, this is going to motivate you to do better, right?
This brings me to the other question, which is that it's not just the association of the swastika wrongly made with the hooked cross, but there are enough even historians or, noted writers who have somehow claimed that Hitler was influenced by Hindu fascist ideology or vice versa. So actually people have tried to build on this connection, which was wrong to begin with, and somehow equate Nazism with some sort of Hindu fascism, which in itself is a tenuous claim.
There's no claim at all, actually.
Yeah.
So actually Hitler had a very low opinion of Indians because, we were brown people and Hitler was all about racial purity. And even though he was at war with the British, he was happy that at least the British were ruling over us inferior brown people, right? So obviously he thought, the best would be the superior German, Aryan, whatever to race. But in that absence, it was better that at least, these brown savages were being ruled by the British. And you can look up the treatment of Hitler and the Indian team in the Olympics, right? If he had any love for the Indian team, he certainly didn't show it. So I think this is one of the dangers of India and Hindus allowing this misrepresentation.
But do you feel that there is a particular lobby or a set of people who further this wrong narrative, the connection with swastika, the connection with Nazism to somehow, Hindu ideology?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, if we don't correct this danger, it's actually going to go further and further. Because there's a set of Hindu-phobic players in the world that are now actually making connections that, I wish if I could share. There was a tweet that Audrey Truschke put out in fall of 2021. And she's like, mostly the swastika is used in a positive context in India. I'm like, excuse me? Mostly?
Yeah.
Like, who would use a swastika in a non-positive context in India, right? It would literally make no sense. Like, if I tried to use it as a hate symbol, it would be like, why is this person wishing me good luck, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Nobody would get it.
Nobody would get it. But this is the danger, because in the era of Google, Google mistranslates the Hakenkreuz as the swastika, right?
Yes.
And more generations are growing up with this knowledge. So I think it's really important to fix that, because narratives never stop in one place. They just build on and get worse and worse.
How successful do you think you've been in the US to kind of arrest this narrative?
I think the fact that today many people even are aware of the word Hakenkreuz, that's a success in itself, because I think 4 or 5 years ago nobody knew about the existence of the word Hakenkreuz. And if you go to our website, there's one page we point to all the time, because it's not just Hitler who called it the Hakenkreuz. The press that was reporting on the rise of the Hitler also called it the Hakenkreuz, including the New York Times, the Jewish Free Journal, etc. Right? And if you go to our website, you can actually click on each of those links, because of course people are like, oh, are you doctoring stuff? I'm like, nope. Click on that link. It'll take you to New York Times archival page. If you have a subscription, you can see what they wrote about in 1922, in 1933. So they were calling it the Hakenkreuz, and actually they called Hitler's followers the Hakenkreuzlers. That's how omnipresent the word was. And then
somehow it got corrupted.
Well, New York Times played a role in that. In 1933, they switched their own reporting, and they they wrote an article saying, oh, the rise of Hitler and this ancient symbol from India. And it's like, dude, your own article was calling it the Hakenkreuzler, so why are you suddenly,
No, it's the fundamental question, as you said, why would Hitler use an Indian symbol?
Why would he?
To motivate a German population for his own, for his own campaign. But I do want to finally ask you, Pushpita, for Americans, this is certainly a big danger, and nobody should be okay with the stigmatizing of the Hindu swastika. But why do you feel that the Indians in India should also be aware of this and should also join on this mission? Because the dangers are there for everyone, I think.
Absolutely. So I'll make it really personal, right? Every year, thousands and thousands of Indian students go to the US to start their studies. Thousands and thousands of workers go on H-1Bs and temporary visas. I always bring up the example of a student, right? A young 18-year-old, 20-year-old going into a dorm room, and maybe your dadi or your nani gave you a little good luck symbol, or you're carrying a little murti or a puja artifact. Highly likely that you have a swastika on it, and you put it in your room, and in comes your dorm, your roommate, and completely has a freak out session saying, oh my God, I've been paired with a Nazi, right? And that's why context matters. Because if your roommate was aware that this symbol had multiple meanings and multiple names, it'll take them a second. Just that, like, when we look at somebody wearing a cross, we don't immediately say, oh my God, I got white supremacists. No, you know what you're looking at from the context.
Yeah.
And the same for the swastika. So Indians are in deep danger, could be in danger themselves. And this is not hyperbole, right? There have been Indian students, there have been non-Indian students who have been doxxed and faced, had to apologize for having swastika. Indian, many residents who will put up a swastika on Diwali, and then they get a talking to from their, association or something. So this is an ongoing problem.
Very quickly, what next for you? How do you build on this campaign in US and otherwise?
So we're going to build on the success of the law on the legal side and run an education campaign, both on social media but also in the real world. So we work with law enforcement officers. We look at all over the country, and we're going to up that campaign. We're going to work more on that side. And then in January, we're actually on Makar Sankranti. We're actually going to do a social media campaign asking everyone to change their DPs to a swastika. So I hope everyone joins in.
Can I ask you very quickly, if you were to tell our viewers how they should respond to someone who tells them that, oh, you're using the Nazi symbol and you shouldn't be do so, as some aggressive behavior they face, what is it that people should tell those people to make sense to them, or to drive that conversation that please don't confuse the swastika with the Hakenkreuz?
Well, that's the thing, right? Hitler never stole the swastika. Hitler stole the Hakenkreuz. So if anybody is objecting to the display, they need to take it up, and it's a Hakenkreuz that is the issue, not swastika. So let's not empower Hitler more in his death than he was in life. That's what I'd say. And people need to understand that we never gave up the word. We never gave up the symbol, right? So there's no need to take it back because it was always ours. India was no party. Remember, India was a colony when all of this was happening, right? And so was in no position to fight back or make its case, because there were bigger priorities that a newly minted Indian government had to deal with. But that's not the case today. And so, for example, if the Indian government starts using the word Hakenkreuz in its literature or using that could make a big difference itself.
No, absolutely. There's no excuse for Indian, literature to not do that.
Or for the Indian media, for that matter.
For the Indian media to not do that.
Right.
So it is important to even educate a lot of Indians to not misuse that term, because in normal parlance, that's what happens. We call it the Nazi swastika. Do you feel that this period, because of the Israel and the Jewish the fact that they underwent a Holocaust, etc., is being talked about a lot more? There are some people who've been caught on streets globally displaying even the Nazi symbol, and then it gets called the swastika. This period could be very key to actually hammer that message again, that don't call it the swastika.
Absolutely. And I actually think that's a way to demolish hate, right? Because this is a bit, because if you start to distinguish that, then when somebody sees a swastika, they won't take it as a hate symbol.
Yes.
As a Jewish person, I always say, right, or as a non-Jewish person who doesn't know the context, in California, there's some Buddhist monastery, right? You're up on a mountain road, you need help, your car broke down, you go up to the monastery, you don't know what the heck you are, where you are, but you see a swastika on its gates and you freak out and you run back thinking, oh my God. Whereas you could actually get help, right?
Absolutely.
Or from Hindu mandir. So I think we all benefit from accurate knowledge and context.
Absolutely. The bottom line is that it is inaccurate to call the Nazi symbol the swastika, and that's really where it should end. Pushpita Prasad, thanks a lot for joining us on this Plain Speak special. With that, it's time for me to take your leave. The Hard Facts is coming up.